Bhishma Nirvana by Dr. Nilesh Oak. Chapter 11. Superficial and Manipulative Claims. The test of originality for an idea is not the absence of one single predecessor, but the presence of multiple but incompatible ones. Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Let us revisit the grains and chaff separation matrix trademark to refresh ourselves on the definition of superficial and manipulative claims. A claim that empirically tests arbitrary or selective set of data but avoids testing and analyzing all relevant evidence is termed as a superficial and manipulative claim. The superficial aspect of these claims is the illogical and unscientific decision, deliberate or ignorant, to include and test only arbitrary and selective sets of evidence while avoiding deliberately or ignorantly the inclusion, analysis and testing of all relevant data. A researcher who produces such claims is termed as, without assigning any motive to his actions, a superficial manipulator. Most claims for the year of the Mahabharata war 125 plus fall into this fourth quadrant of superficial and manipulative claims. For brevity, we will analyze only those claims that have proposed the first day of Mahabharata war and the day of Bhishma Nirvana. These claims rely on selective evidence of 58 days and or the lunar tithi of Bhishma Nirvana to be that of Magha Shukla 8. Implicit in these two assumptions of Nilakanta Chaturdhar is also the implicit assumption of the war beginning on the day of Kartik Amavasya. We will award 1 point each for satisfying the condition of 58 days plus or minus 1 day and the condition of Magha Shukla 8 or Magha Shukla Ashtami plus or minus 1 day, provided the day of Bhishma Nirvana so claimed, even though based on an illogical premise of two selective references, fall on the day of the winter solstice plus or minus 1 day. This is because corroborating the requirement of the winter solstice is crucial for any claim of Bhishma Nirvana. Anushasan Parva CE 153-27-28 GP 167-27-28 अष्टपञ्चाशतं रात्रिः शयानस्याद्यमे गतः शरेषु निशिताग्रेषु यथा वर्षशतं तथा माघोऽयं समनुप्राप्तो मासः पुण्यो युधिष्ठिर त्रिभागशेषः पक्षोऽयं शुक्लो भवितुमर्हति. Most of the researchers, although not all, who made these claims are still around. I kindly encourage and request them to critique my work. They must provide rebuttal to my criticism of their specific claims and provide the explanation of why they chose only selective evidence. It will be interesting to see if they remain convinced of their claims even after analyzing my work and my criticism of their research. My prediction is that most of them, if not all, will avoid responding. This is because to reject my date would amount to rejecting Mahabharata evidence. We will analyze the claim beginning with the oldest date or year proposed. 11.1 V.M. Shaligram, Bhishma Nirvana claim 24th December 5774 BCE, Gregorian reference calendar. Shaligram proposed 18 October 5774 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 27th October 5774 BCE. Shaligram claimed 24 December 5774 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Chaitra Shukla Ekadashi. The motivation to select 24 December appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective reference of 58 days, that is from 27th October through 24th December. On the other hand, the actual day of the winter solstice was 7 to 6 days earlier, that is on 17th December 5774 BCE, and thus Shaligram keeps Bhishma waiting on the bed of arrows unnecessarily for additional 5 to 6 days. The lunar tithis for the timeline of Shaligram are completely out of whack. His first day of the war is Magha Shukla 4 and Bhishma Nirvana on Chaitra Shukla 11. 11.2 5561 BCE. We will discuss the claim of Dr. P.V. Vartak and my claim in this section. Since both of us agree on the year 5561 BCE for the year of Mahabharata war, and since both of us also agree on the 18th day long timeline of the Mahabharata war, beginning with 16th October 5561 BCE through 2nd November 5561 BCE. On the other hand, the day of Bhishma Nirvana claimed by us are separated by 40 days. 11.2.1 PV Vartak Bhishma Nirvana claim 22nd December 5561 BCE confused reference calendar. Vartak proposed 16th October 5561 BCE per Julian calendar reference as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war was 25 October 5561 BCE. Vartak claimed 22nd December 5561 per confused calendar reference as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magh Shukla 8. The motivation to select 22nd December appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective reference of 58 days, that is from 25th October through 22nd December, and the Tithi of Magh Shukla 8. Vartak was indeed aware of numerous additional Bhishma Nirvana references from the Mahabharata text. Unfortunately, he misinterpreted them forcefully to fit the duration of 58 days and failed miserably. On the other hand, the actual day of winter solstice was 40 days away in the future, 30 or 31st January 5560 BCE. Vartak also confused himself and his readers by following Julian calendar for the rest of his work while jumping suddenly and illogically to the Gregorian calendar to state the day of Bhishma Nirvana. It is worth mentioning that the day of winter solstice in the year 5561 BCE per Gregorian calendar occurred on 17th December and not on 22nd December. A massive disaster on all fronts. 11.2.2 Nilesh N. Oak Bhishma Nirvana claim 31 January 5560 BCE Julian reference calendar. Since I have accepted Vartak's timeline for the 18 days of the war 16 October to 2nd November 5561 BCE, I will discuss my date of 31 January 5560 BCE for the day of Bhishma Nirvana. My claim of 31 December 5560 BCE corroborates all the evidence of Bhishma Nirvana, especially when we consider explanations and multiple interpretations discussed in chapter 10. However, since two references of 58 days and Magh Shukla 8 have been so convincingly misinterpreted for more than 300 years, beginning with Nilakanta Chaturdhar in the late 17th century all the way to our times, I count 2 points against my claim as a friendly concession to laziness of other Mahabharata researchers. My truth likeness score TS is 59 minus 2. 11.3 Vedavir Arya Bhishma Nirvana claim 31st December 3163 BCE Julian reference calendar. Vedavir Arya proposed 25 October 3163 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 3rd November 3163 BCE. Vedavir Arya claimed 31 December 3163 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magh Shukla 8. The motivation to select 31st December appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective references of 58 days, that is from 3rd November through 31st December, and the Tithi of Magh Shukla 8. On the other hand, the actual day of winter solstice was 14 days into future, that is 14 January 3162 BCE, and thus Vedavir Arya forces Bhishma to leave his body at least 14 days earlier than Bhishma's desired day of the winter solstice. 11.4 P.V. Hole Bhishma Nirvana claim 18 January 3142 BCE Julian reference calendar. Hole proposed 13th November 3143 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 22nd November 3143 BCE. Hole claimed 18 January 3142 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The motivation to select 18 January appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective references of 58 days and Magha Shukla 8. Tithi for 18th January was Falgun Shukla 7. The actual day of the winter solstice was 4 days earlier, which is 14th January, than the day claimed by Hole for the day of Bhishma Nirvana. In addition, Hole was forced to make a baseless, that is no evidence conjecture, of the war stopping after Bhishma's fall in the battle for 12 days before it resumed. The Mahabharata text has enormous evidence to show that the war took place consecutively for 18 days. This is a good illustration of desperate levels attempted by Mahabharata researchers to corroborate two selective references of 58 days and Magha Shukla 8. I suggest that there should be an additional category of assigning negative points for suggesting a conjecture that has no basis but rather contradicts enormous existing evidence. However, let's recognize an ingenious although erroneous attempt of late Sri Hole, an astronomer par excellence, by introducing albeit unjustifiable gap of 12 days after the fall of Bhishma. He tried to match 58 days and Magha Shukla Ashtami for his claimed day for Bhishma Nirvana. This imaginary conjecture was also his attempt to explain the alleged late moon rise observed on the 14th day of the war and to match irreconcilable observations of Tirthayatra of Balarama. Hole is not alone in making such baseless conjectures. We may have an opportunity to identify a few additional ones by other researchers before this chapter is over. 11.5 Saroj Bala. Bhishma Nirvana claim 19 December 3140 BCE Gregorian calendar reference. Saroj Bala proposed 13 October 3140 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 22nd October 3140 BCE. Bala claimed 19 December 3140 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. That day happens to be Falgun Shukla 6. The motivation to select 19 December appears to be driven by her desire to corroborate the selective reference of 58 days, that is from 22nd October through 19 December. The Mahabharata text states in no uncertain terms that Duryodhana was killed on the 18th day of the war. On the other hand, Bala was forced to make a baseless assumption of Duryodhana running away from the battle on the 18th day of the war and was being found out 12 days later, that is 12 days after the last or 18th day of the war. I am confident readers will have their own deja vu moment. While late Sri Hole stopped the war for 12 days after the 10th day of the war, Bala extended the war by 12 days after the 18th and the last day of the war. Both attempts are ingenious yet ultimately unsuccessful efforts to corroborate irreconcilable observations of Tirthayatra of Balarama. It is important to realize the common thread among these researchers, the common factor of having a priori conclusion or claim for the year of Mahabharata war, which then is justified by twisting and torturing the evidence, including insertion of imaginary events not mentioned in the Mahabharata text. Since this false conjecture of extending the war by 12 days have no direct effect on Bhishma Nirvana, and the fact that the day of Bhishma Nirvana claimed by Bala does occur on the day of winter solstice, we can count 1 point in favor of her proposal in our calculations of truth-likeness score. 11.6 Srinivas Raghavan. Bhishma Nirvana claim 17 January 3066 BCE Julian reference calendar. 11.6.1 Srinivas Raghavan. K. Srinivasa Raghavan proposed 22nd November 3067 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 1st December 3067 BCE. Raghavan claimed 17 January 3066 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Falgun Shukla 7. It is impossible to determine what were the motivations of Raghavan in proposing any of these dates. He proposed the first day of the war that occurs on Shukla Ekadashi plus or minus 1 day or plus or minus 1 tithi probably based on a traditional yet erroneous date of Gita Jayanti, Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi. The evidence of the Mahabharata text is decisive on Kartik Amavasya as the first day of the war. It is not a surprise that the entire endeavor of Professor Raghavan to determine the year of the Mahabharata war is a downfall journey with no chance for recovery. We will limit ourselves to discussing only those blunders that relate to the events of Bhishma Nirvana. Raghavan focused only on selective evidence of 58 days and Magha Shukla Ashtami. However, he ran into additional difficulties because of his false start for the day of the Mahabharata war, which in turn was based on traditional belief rather than internal evidence of the Mahabharata text. He tried to save his claim from his predicament by translating the reference of 58 days in an innovative fashion. It is not clear if Professor Raghavan requested this individual Shriman Vidwan Melma Narsimha Tathacharya Swamigal Eval, or if Shriman Swamigal had translated this reference earlier and Professor Raghavan simply came across it. Shriman Vidwan Melma Narsimha Tathacharya Swamigal translated reference of 58 days as Bhishma, who was on the bed of arrows, said, "I have not slept for 58 days, from the day he was made the general of Kaurava army." Unfortunately, even such extreme juggling and torture of evidence was not sufficient. The Mahabharata text has clear references that show that the day when Bhishma was made the general of Kaurava army was long before the first day of the war and not just the day before the war. For example, Bhishma was made a general of Kaurava army long before the first day of the Mahabharata war. Udyog Parva CE 148 1-4, GP 150 1-4. वासुदेव उवाच एव मुक्ते तु भीष्मेण द्रोणेन विदुरेण च गान्धार्या धृतराष्ट्रेण न च मन्वोन्वबुध्यत अवधूयो तितः क्रुद्धो रोषात् संरक्तलोचनः अन्वद्रवन्ततं पश्चात् राजांस्त्यक्तजीवितः अज्ञापयच्च राज्ञस्तान् पार्थिवान् दुष्टचेतसः प्रयाध्वं वै कुरुक्षेत्रं पुष्योद्येति पुनः पुनः ततस्ते पृथिवीपालाः प्रययुः सहसैनिकाः भीष्मं सेनापतिं कृत्वा संधृष्टः कालचोदितः. And Udyog Parva CE 153-26 GP 156-26. वैशंपायन उवाच ततस्सेनापतिं चक्रे विधिवद् भूरि दक्षिणं धृतराष्ट्रात्मजो भीष्मं सोऽभिषिक्तो व्यरोचत्. And then the Kauravas went to Kurukshetra and established their base at Kurukshetra. Udyog Parva CE 153 34-35 and GP 156 34-35. परिक्रम्य कुरुक्षेत्रं कर्णेन सह कौरवः शिबिरं मापयामास समे देशे नराधिपः मधुरानुशरे देशे प्रभूतय वसेन्दने यथैव हस्तिनापुरं तद्भिच्छिबिरमाबभौ. After this incident, the Pandavas chose their general and then headed for Kurukshetra and established their base. There are various other instances of Balarama who visited Kurukshetra and left for Tirthayatra on Maitri or Anuradha Nakshatra, followed by the visit of Rukmi and his departure, and this is when Duryodhana sent Uluka to the Pandava camp. The bottom line is there was a significant interval between the day when Bhishma was made the general of Kaurava army and the first day of the war. This incorrect translation could not save Professor Raghavan's claim. Per this new interpretation, he assumed that Bhishma had not slept from the first day of the Mahabharata war. Even with this incorrect interpretation of Professor Raghavan could not show how there were 58 days from the first day of Mahabharata war to the day of the winter solstice. Even assuming Bhishma did not sleep for the night before the first day of the war until the day of winter solstice, that is from 21st November through 13th January, day of the winter solstice, it still amounts to only 54 days and not 58 days. Raghavan had to force Bhishma to stay on the bed of arrows for more than 4 days beyond the day of the winter solstice to corroborate the condition of 58 days and Magha Shukla 8. Raghavan published his work in 1969 CE. 11.6.2 Narahari Achar. About 30 years after the work of Professor Raghavan, Professor Achar came on the scene and despite all the problems described here, declared that he, that is Achar, had tested the claims of Professor Raghavan. Not only did Professor Achar fail to comprehend serious issues related to the claim of Professor Raghavan, but dogmatically declared 3067 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. 11.6.3 Manish Pandit. Unfortunately, the story of 3061 BCE is not over yet. Shri Manish Pandit, a medical professional and a good filmmaker, claims that he has verified the claims of Professor Achar and he is convinced that 3067 BCE is the year of the Mahabharata war and is busy making a documentary film on this very date. Let's be ready with this book in hand to enjoy the film of Shri Manish Pandit when and if it is released. 11.7 PC Sengupta. Bhishma Nirvana claim 15 January 2448 BCE Julian reference calendar. Sengupta proposed 4th November 2449 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 13th November 2449 BCE. Sengupta claimed 15 January 2448 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magha Krishna 12. Sengupta shows, like Dr. Vartak, awareness of additional observations related to Bhishma Nirvana. He twists, turns, and misinterprets the chronology narratives and arrives after much confusion, claiming 15 January 2448 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. His motivation for claiming 15 January is due to his colossal confusion with the reference of Krishna stating Bhishma had 58 additional days to live. On the other hand, the actual day of the winter solstice was 6-7 days before, that is on 8th January 2448 BCE, and thus Sengupta keeps Bhishma waiting on the bed of arrows unnecessarily for 6 to 7 additional days. 11.8 Anand Sharan. Bhishma Nirvana claims 6 January 2155 BCE Julian reference calendar. Anand Sharan proposed 21st October 2156 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 9th November 2156 BCE. Professor Sharan claims 6 January 2155 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magha Krishna 2. There are about 58 days per the claim of Professor Sharan for the duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows. Thus, he could corroborate one selective reference out of 61 plus references of Bhishma Nirvana. 11.9 Mohan Gupta. Bhishma Nirvana claim 23rd December 1952 BCE Julian reference calendar. Mohan Gupta proposed 17 October 1972 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 26 October 1952 BCE. Professor Gupta claimed 23rd December 1952 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magha Shukla 8. The motivation to select 23rd December appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective reference of 58 days, that is from 26 October through 23rd December, and to match the second selective reference of Magha Shukla 8. On the other hand, the actual day of the winter solstice was 13 days into the future, that is 5th January 1951 BCE. And thus Professor Gupta forces Bhishma to leave his body at least 13 days earlier than Bhishma's desired day of the winter solstice. 11.10 Ashok Bhatnagar. Bhishma Nirvana claim 20th December 1793 BCE Gregorian reference calendar. Ashok Bhatnagar proposed 14 October 1793 BCE as the first day of the Mahabharata war. This means the 10th day of the war when Bhishma fell in the battle was 23rd October 1793 BCE. Sri Bhatnagar claimed 20th December 1793 BCE as the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The day happens to be Magha Shukla 9. The motivation to select 24th December appears to be driven by his desire to corroborate the selective reference of 58 days, that is from 23rd October through 20th December, and the selective reference of Magha Shukla 8. He shows ignorance of 59 additional chronology observations of Bhishma Nirvana. The day of 20 December 1793 BCE is within plus or minus 1 day of the day of the winter solstice. Thus, Bhatnagar's claim scores 2 points. Summary: most Mahabharata researchers 121 plus do not bother to determine the day of Bhishma Nirvana. They are clueless of the importance of Bhishma Nirvana in determining the year of the Mahabharata war. Few, that is 10 plus, researchers who do show inclination to determine the day of Bhishma Nirvana exhibit obsessive compulsive focus on 2 selective references out of about 61 specific references related to Bhishma Nirvana, and thus exhibit compulsive and illogical disregard towards 59 plus relevant references of Bhishma Nirvana. Naturally, their claims for Bhishma Nirvana cannot corroborate most of the references of the Mahabharata text. To make it worse, many of them are not aware of additional references related to Bhishma Nirvana, and even after becoming aware of them, they have failed to realize the falsification of their claims. 2 researchers, Dr. Vartak and Professor Sengupta, showed awareness of some of the additional references in addition to 2 selective references of 58 days and Magha Shukla 8 of Bhishma Nirvana. While Dr. Vartak interpreted them to suit the claim of 58 days, Professor Sengupta twisted and interpreted one specific reference of 56 days to reach a misleading conclusion. All researchers discussed in this chapter showed obsessive compulsive focus for 2 of the 61 plus observations, one 58 days duration and second Magha Shukla 8 for the day of Bhishma Nirvana. The evidence of this book decisively falsifies all existing claims for the day and the year of Bhishma Nirvana. Yes, you read that right. Chapter 12: Implications and Growth of Knowledge. Science is not about control. It is about cultivating a perpetual condition of wonder in the face of something that forever grows one step richer and subtler than our latest theory about it. It is about reverence, not mastery. Richard Powers. Superior theory or superior claim explains more and is better tested. Every worthwhile new theory or claim leads to new predictions, which in turn may lead to new problems. Frankly, the worth of a new theory can be measured by new problems, that is, problems of an ever-increasing depth and ever-increasing fertility. The lasting contribution to the growth of scientific knowledge that a new theory and claim can make is the new problems it raises. 12.1 3 Astronomy Poison Pills. Arundhati Vasishta AV observation is the first astronomy poison pill. The evidence of Bhishma Nirvana has produced 2 additional astronomy poison pills. These 3 poison pills destroy the myth that my claim for the year 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war was solely based on only one key Mahabharata observation of Arundhati Vasishta AV. 12.1.1 Arundhati Vasishta AV observation. The scientific testing of Arundhati Vasishta observation had produced an interval of 6,500 years, that is 11,091 BCE to 4,508 BCE for the epoch of Mahabharata war. 12.1.2 Bhishma Nirvana. The evidence of lower and upper limits for Bhishma Nirvana produced an interval of about 4,300 years, which is 8,000 BCE to 3,700 BCE, for the epoch of Bhishma Nirvana and thus the Mahabharata war. The combining of these 2 inferences would produce an overlapping interval of about 3,500 years, that is 8,000 BCE to 4,508 BCE. 12.1.3 Margashirsha and first half of Sharat season. The evidence of war occurring during the lunar month of Margashirsha and during the first half of Sharat season produced an interval of about 2000 years, which is 6722 BCE to 4562 BCE. The evidence of war taking place during the Shukla Paksha of Margashirsha and during the first half of Sharad season produced a refined interval of about 2000 years, 7285 BCE to 5125 BCE. These multiple intervals together tighten the interval to about 1600 years, that is 5125 BCE to 6722 BCE, for the epoch of Bhishma Nirvana and thus the Mahabharata war. The year of Mahabharata war 5561 BCE indeed falls within this crisp and narrow interval of 1600 years. 12.2 Alternate claims of Mahabharata chronology are false. These three astronomy poison pills falsify all alternate claims 130 plus for the year of the Mahabharata war. Either of these poison pills, individually or in various combinations, achieve this mighty feat. This is indeed the power of astronomy poison pills. 12.3 AIT or AMT is false. Aryan invasion theory AIT or Aryan migration theory AMT is not a theory but a dogma. The proponents of this dogma try hanging on to any last straw to keep it active. The havoc created by AIT as a destructive force for the unity of India is well known and will not be discussed. The dogma of AIT or AMT has four specific claims. 1. There were people who called themselves Aryan and lived outside India. 2. These Aryans migrated from somewhere outside India into Greater India. 3. This happened sometime after 2000 BCE and before 1000 BCE. 4. These Aryans brought the Sanskrit language or the precursor to Sanskrit languages with them to India. If we can demonstrate that a Sanskrit-based culture existed and flourished in India long before 2000 BCE, then the dogma of AIT or AMT is destroyed. The astronomy poison pills discovered in this book convincingly show the existence of a flourishing Sanskrit-based culture in the 6th millennium BCE and thus destroy the dogma of AIT or AMT. 12.4 Antiquity of World Civilizations. The chronology established in my previous books, Ramayana in 12,209 BCE, Mahabharata in 5561 BCE, assert that the Indian civilization is the most ancient civilization in the world. This book further corroborates assertion of 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. 12.5 Ancient Saraswati River. The success of a theory is to be gauged by the predictions it makes and how many of these predictions come out to be true. My predictions for the historicity of the river Saraswati and her tributaries are being validated by new research from the fields of hydrology, geology, climatology, geophysics, and morphodynamics of rivers. The story gets even better when we realize that for the first time, this combined evidence has allowed us to firmly establish the chronology of Rigveda. The story begins with my original work on the chronology of Mahabharata. In 2011 CE, I established 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. The Mahabharata text has more than 100 references to river Saraswati, which enables us to ascertain the state of the river at the time of the Mahabharata. The river is described as flowing with ample water in many places. However, the river is also described as disappearing in the sand of the desert, flowing underground at other locations, and emerging from the sand at still other locations. In 2014 CE, I established 12,209 BCE as the year of Rama-Ravan Yuddha. The Valmiki Ramayana descriptions tell us the river Saraswati was indeed flowing during Ramayana. However, river Yamuna had already separated from it, and interestingly, the river Shatudri or Satluj was no longer flowing south to meet river Saraswati, but rather was flowing westward. Thus, during the 13th millennium BCE itself, Saraswati was deprived of waters of the rivers Shatudri and Yamuna, and that meant the grand Saraswati of Rigveda was no longer grand during Ramayana and Mahabharata times. These textual descriptions of river Saraswati, when combined with absolute chronology of Ramayana in the 13th millennium BCE and the Mahabharata in 6th millennium BCE, lead to the following predictions for river Saraswati and her tributaries. 1. Grand Saraswati of Rigveda existed only before 12,209 BCE. 2. The river Shatudri had stopped flowing southward and stopped meeting river Saraswati sometime before 12,209 BCE. The confirmation of these predictions were validated in November 2017. Singh in 2017 showed that the river Shatudri had stopped flowing south, feeding its water to river Saraswati around 13,000 BCE. This was a phenomenal corroboration for the textual descriptions of the river Shatudri flowing west in 12,209 BCE Ramayana times. This paper also showed, based on their analysis of earth core obtained from the paleo channel of the Saraswati river at Kalibangan, and that the river Saraswati had lost its grand status after 22,000 BCE. The implications of this study are staggering. This meant that the grand Saraswati river described in the oldest mandalas of Rigveda 6, 3, 7, 4 and 2 existed only before 22,000 BCE, and that also meant these mandalas were composed before 22,000 BCE. Let us turn to 6th millennium BCE, the timing of the Mahabharata. Although the Mahabharata text describes the river Saraswati disappearing under the sand and flowing under the sand, numerous descriptions exist where river Saraswati is flowing with ample lucid waters. And the natural question is, if big rivers like Shatudri and Yamuna had stopped feeding waters to river Saraswati long before 6th millennium BCE, what was the source of ample water in the river Saraswati at the time of the Mahabharata war? The answer to this question came from climatology. Sarkar in 2016 showed decisive evidence for the intensification of monsoons beginning 7000 BCE and lasting until 4500 BCE. Thus, the evidence for the river Saraswati corroborates the absolute chronology estimates of 5561 BCE for the Mahabharata and 12,209 BCE for the Ramayana. And the additional benefit was the determination of the lower limit of 22,000 BCE for the composition of the oldest mandalas of Rigveda 6, 3, 7, 4 and 2. 12.6 Lower limit on the chronology of Rigveda. The oldest mandalas of Rigveda 6, 3 and 7 are predominantly composed by sages of Vashishta and Vishwamitra lineages who were most active prior and during the Ramayana times. The 10th and the last mandala of Rigveda contains Richa that mention Rama, Vena and Prithu of Ishwaku lineage 1093 and Shantanu and Devapi of Kuru lineage 10.98. King Shantanu was the father of Bhishma, and one may wonder how this information became part of the Rigveda. And the answer is rather easy. The Mahabharata text tells us that Maharshi Vedavyasa did edit the Vedas. Adi Parva CE 57, 72 to 76, GP 63, 87 to 91. Padapasarinam dharmam vidvansatu yuge yuge आयुः शक्तिं च मर्त्यानां युगानुगम वेक्ष च ब्रह्मणो ब्राह्मणां च तथानुग्रहकाम्यया विव्यासवेदान्यस्माच्च तस्माद्व्यास इति स्मृतः वेदानध्यापयामास महाभारतपञ्चमान् सुमन्तु जैमिनीं पैलं शुकं चैव स्वमात्मजं प्रभुर्वरिष्ठो वरदो वैशम्पायनमेव च संहितास्तैः पृथक्त्वेन भारतस्य प्रकाशितः। तथा भीष्मशान्तनवो गङ्गायाममितद्युतिः वसुवीर्यात् समभवन् महावीर्यो महायशः. Thus we can infer that the last or 10th mandala was edited during the Mahabharata times. This means that the 6th millennium BCE is the lower limit for the chronology of the Rig Veda. Now DAMIT refers now discredited Aryan migration or invasion theory. 12.7 Improving quality of Indic research. My original research work presented in this book, when combined with work presented in my previous 2 books, have huge implications for the quality of research being conducted in ancient Indian history. My work has single-handedly shifted the research methodology away from dogmatic, skeptical, and manipulative methods to the most scientific method. In addition, the research presented in these 3 books not only meet but also exceed the requirements of sophisticated falsification as explained by Imre Lakatos. Truth likeness score TS and truth likeness method trademark are tools to demonstrate aspects of sophisticated falsification. All Mahabharata researchers, barring a few notable exceptions such as S.B. Dikshit, P.V. Kane, and P.V. Vartak, have produced works that do not reach the level demanded by even a juvenile definition of falsification, for example, dogmatic falsification. In fact, this is the very reason these researchers avoid discussion of any evidence that instantly falsify their claims. 12.8 Myth of a theory that explains everything. If one dreams of a theory that explains not only when Bhishma Nirvana occurred, but also the mystery behind Bhishma's ability to keep himself alive until the day of the winter solstice, we certainly cannot blame such an individual. We all would want to see such a theory. In scientific language, we will call such a theory with the highest level of universality. Why don't we have such theories in physics, chemistry, biology, evolution, geology, genetics, or history? The reason we do not have such theories with a high level of universality is because such theories are too far removed from the level reached by the testable science of the day, and for that very reason may give rise to a metaphysical system. 12.9 Path of Science. One who truly understands this scientific process will immediately recognize that the merit of a specific theory is always to be judged in the context of another theory, whether one's own or those of others. Discussion of a theory in the absence of another theory or without the context of a specific problem is futile. This is because science is not a system of certain well-established statements, nor is it a system that steadily advances towards a state of finality. Although it can neither attain truth nor probability, the striving for knowledge and the search for truth are still the strongest motives for scientific discovery. Not all poetry is mythical, and not all science is cosmology. And it is not unusual to see poetry and science come together when one reads Nasadiya Sukta of Rigveda. A large part not only of poetry but also of science can still be described as naive attempts of explaining our world to ourselves. Bold ideas, unjustified anticipations, and speculative thoughts are our only means for interpreting nature and history. We must hazard them to win our prize. As novelists said, theories are like nets. Those who cast them may catch. Oscar Wilde says, experience is the name everyone gives to their mistakes. And John Archibald Wheeler says, our whole problem is to make the mistakes as fast as possible. Those among us who are unwilling to expose their ideas to the hazard of refutation do not take part in the scientific game. About the author. Nilesh helps Indians become aware of the deep antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend present or defend the grand narrative of India unlike most other Indic researchers because he builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. Nilesh is the author of When Did Mahabharata War Happen? The Mystery of Arundhati 2011 and the historic drama Indian Civilization at the End of Pleistocene in 2014, where he freshly evaluated astronomy observations of Mahabharata and the Ramayana. His work led to the validation of 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war and 12209 BCE as the year of Rama-Ravan Yuddha. His first book was nominated for the Lakatos Award, which is given annually by the London School of Economics for a contribution to the philosophy of science. Nilesh researches in astronomy, archaeology, anthropology, quantum mechanics, economics, ancient narratives, and philosophy. Nilesh writes on ancient Indian history through his blog at https://nileshoak.wordpress.com. The book ends here. Thanks for listening.